I currently do have some speaker request forms for item number 12. If seeing none, or seeing none for 11, what I'd like to go ahead and do, since we only have the 2 items, is we have had a request from the applicant to continue item number 11 for 2 weeks. If we can deal with that one, and then the only item we have left for today will be item number 12.
I'll make that motion.
I've got a motion by Doyle, per the applicant's request, to continue item number 11, which is the appeal of a denial of request for exception to not install a parallel water main along East Anamosa Street adjacent to proposed Lot 1 of Block 1, shortcut subdivision. The motion is to continue that for 2 weeks back to the next Public Works meeting. I've got a second by Estes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
John, do you want to weigh in on continuing item number 11 for 2 weeks? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 11 is continued for 2 weeks. The only item left on today's agenda is item number 12, and I do have several speaker request forms. I will begin. Mr. Tech, you're up at the podium. Do you want to go first, or you're just fixing equipment there? All right. So hopefully the equipment is fixed, but the first speaker that I have is Chuck Roush. If you could approach the podium, state your name and your affiliation with the city, and the committee members are here to listen to your opinions on item number 12. Since this is the only item we're going to discuss, generally you have 3 minutes in public comment to go ahead and state. So the green light tells you go ahead, the yellow light tells you got about 30 seconds, and red if you could kind of wrap up your comments. Committee members may call you back to ask you more questions once the committee members up here start considering item number 12. Thank you, Mr. Roush. If you will go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. We have a concern, or I do, that the public, my customers, cannot access my business through the one and only access that we have to our business. And what happens is a neighboring business has customers park in the alley and blocks the access to our business. So it's not all day long, but it's whenever there's a customer there. And according to the regulations that I've seen, he has got a half hour to leave that customer set right where it is. So I've asked him, could I please put up a sign on his building which would face the alley? Would he allow me to put up a sign there to just say, please do not block the alley? He has refused me that sign. So my customers can come and see that the alley is blocked and turn around and leave. I do not know if they're coming through or not. Or they have to wait until his customer is happy with whatever's going on and decides to move his car. I believe with the parking that is there that and I don't know the whole situation behind the parking, but that if he would ask his customers to pull over into the parking lot to unload, that would leave the alleyway open. Just as kind of frustrating for me, especially since someone apparently complained on our end of the alley at one point, and we have a sign in our alley that says no parking at any time. And it points both directions, including his. So I can't park even for 1 minute in my alley, and he gets to block the alley whenever he has a customer for up to a half hour. What we're really asking for, what I'm asking for, is access to my business. And I was under the understanding, I've not researched this, but that the city has to guarantee access to a business, especially since there was access there. That's my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Roush. As I've stated, a committee member may call upon you to answer questions. If you could stick around until we consider this item, that would be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you. Second speaker request I have is Mr. Jeff Hook. I'll try all the vowels and I may get it there. You could please state your name and your affiliation for the city, and the committee members would like to hear your opinion.
Name is Jeff Hoke, owner of Advanced Chiropractic. I'm also dealing with issues with the alley where the customers for Albert Small Engine, they stop in the middle of the alley, and Albert has been told that they have 30 minutes, so he has not offered to tell his customers to pull to the side of the unload. He lets them unload right in the middle, and then everyone is stuck waiting. There's five parallel parking spots in the alley right there that would be more beneficial for his customers to load and unload, but Albert uses those spots to park his lawnmowers, his work vehicles, his trailers. There's been a minivan parked there for like 2 months that didn't even have plates on it and hasn't moved. So we've tried to work, like Chuck has said, he's gone to him and asked him, you know, can you just have your customer pull to the side and move? But he doesn't offer any help. Our office is a chiropractic office. I've had patients that have had to park at the end of the alley to walk through to get to my office. And most chiropractic patients aren't in that good a shape, so it's not a good idea for business. And then as a medical office, I also have questions about, you know, emergency access to my building. So right now, it's just kind of been a struggle. Last fall, we approached the city, and we had conversations about putting up do not block the alley signs and turning those parking spots into like a loading zone, 15-minute parking, so that his customers would have a place to go. But nothing has happened at this point. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could also stand by, committee members may have some questions that they would like to follow up with you as well. Next speaker request form I have is Tracy Krishna. If you could please step to the podium and correct my pronunciation of your name and your affiliation with the city, please.
That was pretty close considering there's no vowels in it, so it's Kirschnock. So.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna.
And I'm half owner of Audio Video Solutions, and we're located at 1104 Jackson Boulevard. And we also use the alley. Albert's business is just to the west of us, so I have to say that Albert's customers parking in the alley doesn't affect us much. But we do use the alley for freight trucks and UPS trucks, and we block the alley as well. And so the chiropractors and the Roush businesses are not just affected by Albert's customers as well. And I guess to go back to a little bit of background, I don't know how many of you were here when Jackson Boulevard was reconstructed, but we were all at several meetings, commission meetings, regarding that because we were all unified at that time in that we were losing on-street parking from Jackson Boulevard. And we had 7 spots out front, and they also had a parking lot access to Jackson Boulevard. But the state came to both Roush's and the chiropractors and offered them damages for the loss of the access to their parking lot. It's my understanding, although I don't know this for a fact, that they could have been, their properties could have been purchased outright and they could have moved somewhere else, but they were awarded financial damages for the loss of access to their parking lot. And at that time, in the meetings, we also discussed the fact of how the alley was used, and it was used that way at that time. And so didn't seem to be a big concern at the time when there was a monetary award involved, but now it seems to be a big problem. So in that regard, we feel that they were awarded damages and they took it. So I guess that's something that they would need to discuss. Now, I had a couple of things from the city code here that I looked up. As far as an alley is a public way of providing a secondary means of access to abutting properties. Alleys shall not provide the only means of access. So they have a business that does not have a proper street, but the street could never conform to a conforming street designation as far as the city is concerned. There's not nearly enough room. And also the parking spots, the parallel parking spots that they talk about that are along the alley are private property, and they belong to another business owner that I don't believe is here today. So to use somebody else's property for that purpose really isn't feasible without their permission. So I think that's all I have to say at this point.
Thank you. Excuse me, and I have one other speaker request, Mr. Doyle Estes. On item number 12, if you could approach the podium, state your name and your affiliation to the city, and the committee members would like to hear your opinion on item number 12.
Thank you. I'm here as lawyer for Albert Gonzalez, who owns Albert Small Engine Repair. And frankly, I don't think I can state it any better than the prior speaker. The first two gentlemen who spoke have been compensated to some degree, and I don't know the exact amount of compensation, but they were compensated for lack of access off of Jackson Boulevard into their property. And the fact that my client and the prior speaker's businesses, their access to their business is through the alleyway, and looking at the city code that's I have in front of me, it talks about access to the alley. People can use the alleyway for unloading and loading personal property. And that's what Mr. Gonzalez's clients are doing. They don't have adequate parking for his clients on Jackson Boulevard since the DOT came in and took away parking. And his clients are Small Engine Repair, obviously with the name, and they need a place to unload and load the vehicles, the equipment that they leave for Albert to fix. So the fact that it presents some problem on a temporary basis for the first two speakers, well, I would say they were compensated by the state for their lack of access off of Jackson Boulevard. And the city code says you can park in the alley for unloading and unloading your stuff, and so unless you're going to change the city code for alleyways, I don't see what else that you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. I currently have no other speaker request forms on item number 12. Would anyone else like to speak? Albert, if you'd go ahead and approach the podium, state your name and your affiliation to the city, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Albert Gonzalez, owner of Albert Small Engine, plus owner of the real estate and those two properties. I was there before all my neighbors over here first, and they have no problem. Last year when we came over here for the last meeting in the DOT, I mentioned it to those people, my neighbors over here, how we was doing business in the moment before this thing happened, and everything was okay because the alley was not open. What they saying about me blocking the alley for half an hour and telling my customers about blocking the alley for half an hour because I knew the law, that's not true, because they just give me the piece of paper saying that it's a law. Because I'm being harassed by them, by the police, by the city. I need to run my business. That's the only way I can run it. And I don't know what to do. He asked me last week to put a sign. And, it takes time to educate the customer to tell it to put on the side so they can have enough room. The property where I park my car belongs to somebody else. There's a parking space for somebody else. They allow me to park over there. My cars, and sometimes put lawnmowers over there. And I don't know how can I run my business without blocking the alley. I guess I'm not blocking, my customers blocking the alley. I just do my service. I think they pay taxes. All the customers pay taxes to be available to use the alley. So I just do my job, trying to do it quick. Sometimes I get 3-4 customers, and I don't know what to do. It's a hassle over there in the back. I know it is. And I'm trying to educate my customer to go around, come back, and then go on the side, but it takes time, and they're not, they're not allow me to take, it's gonna take time. Plus, last Saturday, I got three, I don't know whose customer was one of these two, my neighbors over here. They parked 3 cars in the front of the shop. All morning long, they was parked in the front dealing with, I don't know who it was. And what did my customer have to do? Go through the alley, block the alley, They need to tell the customer that as soon as they park in the front, tell them to go around and park in their parking space. So I have my customer, all my customers, they're not going to go through the back. So I don't know what else to do. I didn't get recompensated by the DOT for nothing. And this, I got a headache right now, and I don't know what to do. So that's the only thing I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speaker requests or anyone in the audience that would like to speak on item number 12 on today's agenda? Sir, if you'd approach the podium, state your name and your affiliation with the city, and we'll listen to what you have to say about item number 12. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Randy Downey, and I'm half owner of Audio Video Solutions as well. I just want to make a comment about, we have had vehicles parked in the alley that have blocked our access to either get in or get out one way or the other, as well as our neighbors have. And everybody's been very good with Albert himself, more importantly, his customers. We go in and we say, whose vehicle is this out here that's parked over here? They're more than willing to move those vehicles. I really don't see that it's a huge issue. All you have to do is, take a little bit of time and ask somebody to move their vehicle.
Thank you. Again, is there any other person in the audience that would like to address item number 12 before the committee members today? Seeing none? Oh. You know what? The committee members will probably be asking you, Mr. Roush, for a question or two, and you already had your time. Depending on what happens to this item, you will have another opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. If there's no one new who would like to give the committee members information on this item, public comment on non-consent item number 12 is now closed. The committee will now address item number 12. Item number 12 is a discussion and staff direction on alley access located south of Clearview Lane in the 1100 block of Jackson Boulevard. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that I want to try to solve this from the dais today, but I do have one quick question right off the top of my head for our city attorney, Joel. Joel, when you have a situation like this and you have a strip of asphalt that is called an alley, because it was probably called an alley because it was a secondary access. So when you get the state, the city, and the building owners all sitting in a room and they all agree to this, and some did get compensated, but then this becomes the sole access for some businesses, is it still an alley?
Yeah, I think it's still an alley because it's not a street at this point. It's certainly not built to street standards. But an alley is just a different type of, in my mind, is a different type of public right-of-way. I guess I would have to look and see if this has actually been dedicated. I think it has been, because I have a recollection that when the office building up above the hill was built, the person wanted to encroach upon it, and it wasn't vacated, so they could do that, and it was an issue for them. So my guess is it is a dedicated right-of-way. It's just an alley is the type of, I guess, road that's within the right-of-way versus a street with curb and gutter and width and things. Usually alleys are smaller.
Thank you. I yield, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you. I have a question for the fire department, if I may. I believe Mr. Billings was here. Okay, I'll hold on and go back to Brad.
Well, while we wait for Mr. Billings to come back, I was going to ask Mr. Deltac, but he went after him, so. Terry, Mr. Wolsterstorff, would you like to give us what background information you have from your department on item number 12 while we wait for Mr. Billings to come back.
My apologies. I'll give you a little bit of mine, and then Dell can weigh in too. We had been approached by the property owners, the chiropractor and Roush Monument Signs, about this issue dating back last summer, I believe it was. And I've been on site and met with both those property owners. And we actually originally did look at posting that alley as an unloading zone. Last fall, actually, we intended on doing that, but part of that included research into, whether or not it was a public alley, had it been dedicated or right away. Make a long story short, the spring staff went out there to kind of scope and look at where the signs were going to be going up, and that's kind of what prompted the meeting today, because that prompted a phone call into our office by some of the additional business owners with concerns over posting it for no unloading. And to be honest with you, this is really what I would classify as a no-winner for Public Works Department, because no matter what we do, there's going to be business owners that are upset. There's really not a right or wrong answer, in my opinion. It's just different. And we felt at this point, really, it was something that the council needed to weigh in on and give us some direction.
So I'll turn to Mr. Dale Tex, since you're at the podium right now, Dale, and then I'll release the floor back to Charity. But if we can get some facts on the table. The alleyway is owned by the city?
The alleyway is public right-of-way held in trust by the city, yes.
The parking lots that abut this alleyway to, well, I'm going to say the north, but it's the back of the property. I believe there's 5 of them there. They're privately owned?
That is correct.
And are they being utilized by the owner of those?
That's unknown to me. I can't speak to the usage of it. It's on private property, and I don't know if they're leasing the spots or letting other people using them or using themselves, but it's certainly not public property.
Okay. And then the designation that's been read into the record concerning alleyways and stuff is that an alleyway should not be the single sole point of access into a property. Has the Public Works Department taken a look at this? Because in my mind, this is a public safety issue.
Right. What he was referring to was design criteria out of our design criteria manual. And the primary function for that is if you're building new streets, new alleys, that shouldn't be the primary access. Technically speaking, these businesses have frontages on Jackson Boulevard, which is another public right-of-way. They don't, however, have direct access to their parking lots off of Jackson Boulevard, so physical access to their properties is indeed by the alley. We have a section in our code, which I think is attached to the agenda, that talks about the restrictions in alleys and what they can be used for, and there's certainly loading and unloading requirements and a 30-minute time limit that is allowed by city code. The design criteria, I think, is a little different. In fact, that it's primarily for new construction.
Okay, and then one other factual before I go back to Alderwoman Doyle. So is this the only sole access by alley location in the city of Rapid City, or are there others?
I'm sure there are others. Nothing come to mind, but
That's okay. I figured there are. So I just wanted to make sure that this was not a unique situation. We have other ones in the city that also fall into this same
I would imagine
situation.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll return back to Alderwoman Doyle. Alderwoman, if you'd like to pose your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would for Mr. Billings, if I may. So just curious, if there were a response or a dispatch to the 2 businesses at the end of this, have you seen the layout?
I have.
Okay. What would your response be? Where would your service vehicles?
Typically, we would probably, in this particular case, that series of buildings is not very long. It's only about 200 feet long.
Okay.
And so there's a street access on the north end of it, Vista Lane, I believe it is, or Clearview. I'm sorry, Clearview, and then the parking lot access on the other side. So we would either utilize either one of those public, either Jackson Boulevard itself, or Clearview, or even the open parking access between Mr. Roush's property and the other one to the south. So we really wouldn't utilize the alley itself, other than for personnel or pulling a hose line or something like that. We wouldn't place an engine or apparatus in there, but we would access it on foot.
But to access the parking lot between those two businesses, you would need to drive through the alley or jump the curb on
We would
Jackson
come over the
Boulevard.
curb probably
Okay.
in that particular case, or simply just stay on Jackson Boulevard itself and reroute traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I currently have no other committee member lights up here. I would like to make a couple suggestions and remind the committee members the options we have before us. We can send item number 12 to council without recommendation. We can send item number 12 back to staff with direction as to come up with a recommendation with some possible criteria that committee members would like to see. We can deny taking any action on this item. We can acknowledge this discussion, and we can continue this item. Those are about all of the options that I believe I can think of, and I'll entertain a motion from any committee member seated today. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Now, if you could just tell me what I'm going to say. You know, we've got a situation here where you know, we had a lot of people sit around in a room and get this figured out quite a few years ago, and I wasn't invited to the table at the time. And I would like to ask Mr. Billings a question quick, if I could. Tim, when this was being talked about, do you know if the fire department was ever invited to this discussion about having an alley access as a primary to two businesses?
Thank you. Yes, we were actually part of that discussion with DOT and when the reconstruction of Jackson Boulevard was taking place. And at that time, it was essentially the same response, is that since the alley was not a point that we would place a piece of apparatus into, we would access it from alternate locations, on either end or the street itself. So,
okay, thank you. You know, as I look at this, you know, we've obviously got two different opinions, or you know, two sides to this, and in play to possibly make this not solve the solution, but maybe to make it better. We've got 5 parallel parking spots. They're owned by a party that's not here. And you know, if there was some way that where those 5 spots could be made a loading and unloading zone so that people could pass through, it might be part of a solution, but and that's why I don't want to try to fix this thing right now from the dais, because it'll be just like the downtown parking. There'll be a lot of things we haven't thought about. So that's where I sit. I think we as a city have a problem, and we as a city need to try to figure out how to make it better. I don't think we can fix it wholly for either party, but I think we could. I think it's upon us to try to make this situation better. So I'll yield. Thanks.
Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to send this back to staff for a recommendation and maintain the floor, if I could get a second. Thank you, John.
I've got a motion by Doyle to send to staff for a recommendation to be brought back
In 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks' time. Second by Roberts. Alderwoman Doyle, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think this poses an extreme challenge, considering that we don't know what strings were attached to the damages paid by DOT. We don't have any access to any of that information. I think staff would be in the best position to acquire that information and look at everything, and then bring back a recommendation. To think that, you know, we're going to be able to do that in a meeting or two is pretty much insane. And then the other thing I'd like to add is that I think something that needs to be looked at is, if an alley is the only access, perhaps it needs a different classification and is no longer an alley. So I think that is something that perhaps Public Works needs to look at. I'll leave it at that.
Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a difficult one that we don't have a lot of information on yet, and I think we do need more information. And I think Brad had an interesting idea there with the spots that were there, but unless the city's willing to purchase them from whoever the owner is and turn them into public property, I think we might have a little problem there. This is one of those situations where the really best answer would be for all the people involved to work together, but if that's going to be difficult to do, and I've known Mr. Gonzalez for 30 plus years, and I know he's not a difficult man to work with, or at least he hasn't been in my dealings with him. So it would be wonderful if some way the parties could get together and work this out, because it sounds like Brad said and like Charity said, we weren't invited to the table when all of this started, and unfortunately, the two business owners on the other end. This was always a question I had in my mind anytime I drove down and they closed your parking lot off, Mr. Roush, was how are you going to access that? How difficult is that going to be to you? And I think that unfortunately we're kind of looking at a situation where maybe we didn't look far enough into the future when that happened. But I believe that we need a little more, a little bit more information on this before we can even consider making an opinion, because we're looking at not only the two people downstream of Mr. Gonzalez's livelihood, but also his. So how do we weigh that? So thank you very much.
I currently have no committee members' lights up. I do have a motion on the floor to send back to staff for recommendation to be brought back to the Public Works Committee meeting in 2 weeks' time. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn by Doyle, second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.